Alright fellas, today's video is going to have a little bit more of a serious tone. Today we are addressing the current state of SUPERVIVE, and I'm just going to be real with you all, it's just not looking all that great. Honestly, it's probably the worst it will get, and some people are all dooming about that, and after some reflection myself, I think that is a pretty hopeful thing for the game's future. Now before I see you all start typing in the comments about how hard I'm coping, trust me, I know what coping is. I was an Overwatch 1 player since 2016 and was coping for years until Overwatch 2 came out. And we all know what happened with that. Trust me, I'm also not making this video for views or to convince you to play SUPERVIVE from the money either. If I wanted money, boys, let's be real, I would be making Marvel Rivals content immediately. This would not be a video on my list to make. SUPERVIVE wouldn't have even been a consideration for me in that whole circumstance, but there is something about this game that I believe in and that I think is important we discuss about it. So let's get right into it. So first off, it's important to bring up the numbers. And to be honest, everyone's already been looking at the player count. Everyone's been dooming about the player count. This graph pretty much shows us what happened when the game released. It had a great uptick. This was around the November 24th, like Sunday, when that whole creator tournament was going on. It was a great peak of about 47,000 players at this point. The highest we have ever seen in SUPERVIVE history. It was great. It was honestly quite good. I thought this game was going to continue going up. It was a really great start. But then as time goes on, things start to taper off, and we'll talk about why the stuff is tapering off and what I've already been trying to tell the devs until we get to about December 6th. And the reason why I bring up December 6th is because this is when competitors started really releasing their games. We're talking Path of Exile 2. We're talking Marvel Rivals. We're also talking about OG Fortnite. And I know that sounds like a big far-fetched competitor here, but let's be real. All of these games are games that have already existed, that have already been talked about before, and we'll talk about that later. But realistically, these are all games that have already been in the evoked set of the player. It was already marked on the calendar. So these are games that were going to beat SUPERVIVE from the start, because this is also Thanksgiving, I believe, the 28th. And this is when people have to go back to school and work starts to kick back up again. And you're just not going to have as much time to play all the different games that you want. That being said, we still are having about 8,000 players a day with no real new content. With no real new content coming out in the past month. So I actually don't think these analytics are as bad as people are saying. It's definitely not good. But let's be real, the whole competition, it's not really the reason why people aren't playing the game. The reason why people aren't playing the game, we are in beta. And I think the big problem with why the game isn't popping off 50,000 plus players a day, I think the big problem why that's happening is just because of an execution for how the devs are releasing the game. And I think that's totally okay. Let's get real critical here. We only have 16 hunters in this game. And in a battle royale hero-based shooter, gonna have to be real with you all, 16 simply just is not enough. And it's not the fact that it's just 16 hunters. It's a fact of what these hunters really mean to players. There's no real lore behind them. There's no story to buy into. No cinematics that I can watch about my favorite character and be like, oh yeah, I want to play that character. And it really reminded me of in 2016 when I was first ever introduced to this hero-based game called Overwatch. Why did I start playing Overwatch? It was because of the Dragons short, the cinematic short with Hanzo and Genji battling it out. It was the most insane thing ever. I see this animated short and I'm like, I gotta play that game right now. I'm seeing the characters in action, the lore actively being built, and now I can buy into it, and I have something to play, a reason to play this game outside of just playing it for the gameplay. That being said, because it is a beta, the only reason why you're playing the game is just to test out the gameplay. There's no extra stuff really going on. There's nothing to buy into. And when the competitors like Marvel Rivals, like Path of Exile 2, actively just have things to buy into, it's like, can we really be surprised that SUPERVIVE isn't doing well right now? With Marvel Rivals, you have an entire comic universe that has been built up for years, decades, maybe even almost a century at this point. I don't know. I'm not that into Marvel stuff. Everyone knows about Marvel. Of course, people are going to start playing that game day one. With Path of Exile 2, I mean, Path of Exile 1 was out in 2013. That had a whole decade and some to have some player base ready to play it again. Are those games, Marvel Rivals and Path of Exile, really gonna do well in the long term, a year, 2 years from now? I mean, I could see them definitely doing well, but not nearly 500,000 players a day. I don't expect anyone to think that. They're going to pop off in the short term for sure. Will they retain that? That's a question for those streamers to make. I mean, go watch Coach Mills. I'm sure he'll be talking about it in the next 2 months when things start to die down a bit. And that's no foul to that game at all. But understand that SUPERVIVE has a very different execution. So let's actually talk about the marketing plan and the reason why I think this game isn't really taking off. I don't have their whole marketing plan, and I don't have information from the devs regarding their marketing plan and how they decide on doing all these things. But what I will say is that while I'm not going to provide you a whole analysis, I do have a degree in this. I graduated from Penn State University with a marketing degree, and I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in this field, but I do have some knowledge, and I did do a lot of research on this field as a result of me studying at Penn State. So the main strategy that they went for in the beta was through creator influence. They're doing sponsored creator ads and trying to really put their game out there. And here's the thing. The problem is creator-based ads with macro influencers, which is typically what they did. They did some micro influencer stuff with me and Tom Kick on TikTok, for example. Not a lot, though. They mostly did macro influencing. And the problem with macro influencing is that it's a really good way to get eyes on the game through impressions. The problem is it's just impressions. And the amount of influence creators actually have when they're macro influencers is much lower than if it was a micro influencer and the influence those influencers have over their communities. Because typically, micro influencers have much stronger relationships with each and every one of their viewers, so that in that regard, it's much easier to influence that community to do things. Someone like Tyler One, for example, he doesn't really care about every single one of his viewers. He just kind of plays and a lot of people watch him to get it. So the whole idea here is through this whole creator thing, it was just to get impressions. It was just to get views of the game, just to get people to have this game in their evoked set. They now know that SUPERVIVE exists. When there's no conversion happening, when there's no advertisement happening outside of that, you're not really going to see players actually playing the game. And I think that's fine because, to be honest, the game isn't really ready for everyone to be playing. It's ready for people that really are interested in it to try it out and make the game better. I think that's realistically what their plan is. Let's talk about why the marketing is going the way that it is and why they're not going all out and they're simply just trying to get impressions. Because let's be honest, is this game ready to release? No, absolutely not. This game is not ready to release. But are we in release? In a modern sense, yes. But is that really what the game is doing? No, because we're actually in a beta. Take a second with me now and let's just look at the game store. Is this something that looks particularly finished to you? I'm not going to say it looks bad, but I don't really think it's finished. And on top of that, let's then take a look at the progression. Is this battle pass really something that looks entirely finished to you? No, I wouldn't say. It's also just, you're not even buying into it. It's completely free. It is completely for those that are actually willing to put the time in and play the game when it's not finished. And also, do you really think this mastery system is something that looks particularly finished to you, especially when you can finish this within maybe 2 weeks of play? I'm going to be honest. I don't think this is finished. And I think when you look at the marketing of this all, it kind of makes sense as to why they're not going full force in on the marketing for this game right now. Because why would I market the game when I am not able to make money off of said game the most optimized way possible? Once this stuff is finished, once the progression is finished, once we start seeing seasons for this game, that is when we're actually going to see marketing for this game. And that is why I actually still have a lot of hope for this game. But if this was the case and their plan wasn't to really get this game to pop off in beta, why release this to begin with? Let's be honest. Like I said before, this is the first beta that we have seen in forever. Usually we get early access games that have half-baked stuff, but have a full store. The store is ready to go so they can make as much money as possible. They have the battle pass that you can buy into, but the game isn't finished. This is not that. This is a beta where the game isn't finished, but the shop isn't finished either. They're not trying to convince you to play the game as this is like the big thing. This is quite literally a work in progress. And I think a lot of people look at SUPERVIVE, they see beta and they're like, oh, open beta, this is full release. They're pretty much there. That is not what this is. They're not there in the slightest. This is like a 2010s Call of Duty beta. That's what this feels like. And that's why I really have no problem in playing the game right now, because it's like, it's not quite done yet. Things need to be worked on. and the alpha playtesters were getting a little bit too good at the game to get data on the newer player base. And now they open up the beta so they can actually have a newer player base and get more data on like how this game functions for players that aren't sweating it out all the time. And now TC has entered the next phase of their 6-month grind cycle that they usually do. This is their serious grind time for them. So as we close out this video, I really want you to imagine what I'm putting forward here. Imagine 3 to 6 months down the road, we have 4 to 6 new hunters, a world that has tangible lore to it so that every time we drop in, there's some sort of emotional attachment to the characters in the environment we are playing in, a solid battle pass system, a decked out shop, and then a refined game with mechanics that help new players get into the game and then reward them for playing more and becoming better players. Then, and only then, is when we're probably going to start seeing advertisements. And we're not just going to see streamers, albeit we're going to see some macro influencing going on, which is great. But we're also going to see ads on platforms like Twitch, like YouTube, like Instagram and Twitter. And at that point, when the game will actually release, that point is when it is do or die. And I genuinely believe when all of these things happen and we start seeing real advertising, when competition isn't so intense, I genuinely believe that the core makeup of SUPERVIVE has a serious chance to shine. I'm like 80 to 90% certain that this game is going to be back to where it was when it first released, if not better. Is the game in a rough spot right now? Absolutely. But do I still really enjoy the game that they're providing to us? Absolutely. I think it's one of the best games I've ever played. And do the devs still have a lot of work ahead of them? Oh, yes, they do. And I'm not going to excuse them for the state that the game is in. They know that, and they're just going to work to try to make this game the best it possibly can be. Is this kind of what everyone expected to have happen, at least in the veteran player base? I mean, yeah. And that's why I'm still here. So I still believe in this game. And I will always love SUPERVIVE, even if it doesn't pop off. But in the most sincere way possible, let the devs cook. The game is not dead. Instead, it's really just getting started. SUPERVIVE is not going anywhere, and I'm not planning on going for quite some time either. Thank you guys all so much for watching, but until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.